review of financial policies is one of the things I'm hoping we will continue in this work that we need to do to create financial stability, reviewing all of our financial policies and seeing if they're up to where this board is comfortable. I think this would be time well spent for us in the coming months.
Part of what you need to consider, and Bob mentioned capital, but in operations, some of your expenses and revenues are relatively fixed, and others are variable. And I think we might want to consider the variable revenues and the variable expenses as the part where there's risk of the two not meeting each other. And so we might want to define our reserve, if we talk policy, we might want to define our reserve requirements in terms of variable expenses rather than fixed expenses, which are much more predictable.
Okay, well that's really all I have to say to present this draft. So I guess I'll turn it back to the board.
So next steps for this, we'll be reviewing it again. Did you say next week? We'll just discuss it for this particular draft. Won't be any changes to it at that point.
Well, you've got a week to look at it on your leisure, and if you come up with something, then that should be presented.
Will we also be able to review a cash flow projection, an updated cash flow projection, so we can kind of ground truth that ending number and
We'll have
a little bit closer?
Our normal financials.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody have any further questions?
Yeah, my question is in reference to our goal. Besides just adopting a budget, and this board has done that year in and year out, adopted a budget, and we see where we're at now, is as we go into this budget process and we're about ready to approve another budget, I guess my question to the board is, what's our goal? You know, what are we trying to accomplish, you know, when everything is said and done? Is it the restoration of services that were cut? Is it trying to get us in much more in the black? And what's that long-term plan? When, you know, what's that policy? What's that goal? And you know, how do we get there? Versus what seems to be is trying to maintain and throwing in those uncertainties. It would be good to be able to articulate or spell that out, what our goal with this budget is.
So I think I shared mine. I'm happy to hear what others are. I think I have two goals. One is to maximize the level of service that we can afford that's sustainable for our community, and to restore fiscal strength for the organization. Those are my two goals for this budget.
I agree.
Yeah, I would say we, of course, want to stay in the black as one goal, and we want to build over time adequate reserves, but we could differ maybe over what the time frame might be for adequate reserve buildup. And the third, and in many ways most important to me, representing South Whitby, is the restoration of as much of the suspended service as is in keeping with staying in the black. So we can't restore services by going into the red, of course.
The surplusing of assets, we show that here?
Surplusing in terms of selling and getting revenue?
Uh-huh.
No, we're not sure.
So we don't plan on doing that in 2015?
Well, we can do that.
Yeah, from my discussion, I spoke with our maintenance manager, and he was talking about the great needs we had for perhaps more money to repair buses, because as they age, you have to start changing out, rebuilding their engines, and that sort of stuff. And so we're getting 4 new light-duty buses, and I think we're planning on 5 medium-sized buses through the grant process. But it doesn't necessarily fill all the needs that you would have for the organization. And I don't know what the number would be, but I have to talk to him and get more details about the life expectancy and when they're going to retire and stuff. But I think that the major theme that I heard in his voice was that we really needed to replace those buses because they're aging. And if we don't, then we're going to be repairing, costs could increase over time, that one too. So there's a real need for additional buses to just complete the natural rotation of the fleet. But we're not talking about surplus in this budget. Surplus will be
I guess my question is, should we? If we have assets that we know that we're not going to use, should we be looking at what's the fair market value and liquidating those versus letting them sit?
Go ahead, address it. That's a problem that we have is because they were acquired with tax money, federal funds, our own public money, and you can't go sell that asset and because you'd be gifting of funds to somebody, that's against the law. So, I'm not 100% sure what our process is to get rid of surplus vehicles. I know we do give vehicles away. We make them available to nonprofits. We have a specific policy about how to do that. There's a way that the state approves you to do that. So, but you can't sell them and make money and put it back in the budget. I wish we could, but we can't.
Well, it would be good for us to take a look and run down a list of our assets and which ones we're handcuffed to and which ones we are liquid, and if they're not being utilized at this point, we need to be as efficient as we possibly can.
Can I just say one thing?
You bet.
I kind of think in the near term, like this current, like 2015, it's still a time of uncertainty as to what are we going to add some routes, are we going to add some service, and if we quickly sell off those assets, it'd be very difficult to repurchase and make those service renewals. So, I think maybe in the short term, it might be prudent to not sell things, not sell buses. So with the eventuality that we might be increasing service in the near term.
I'm trying to build up your cash balance. When we look at other uncertainties,
Our cash balance.
when we look at this, we don't have potential advertising in this as well, right? Or
Potential advertising on the buses.
right, or potential fare income revenues from fare. We could.
Well, like I said, I've been here a short time and I haven't really looked at those in detail, but the response that I got when I was asking about advertisers is that a lot of that is done through bigger brokers and they're not as interested in advertising on transit buses, but I could be wrong on that point. I just want to put that out there. The second one is what I've heard, and again, there was also mention of a study, but if when I spoke with the former director about the topic of adding fares, that saying that every passenger that went on would increase the times, let's say 10 to 13 seconds by depositing those fares. And if we accumulate all that extra time, we would have to make additional runs in order to meet the ferries and the schedules at the various points. And so in order to meet constraints of the riders, the ferries, et cetera, we would have to add more runs, which would cost more than the revenue we were taking in order to service that new schedule. So I think it's a pretty complicated business that needs to be investigated before we just jump into it.
Yeah, I think those are good questions. I think we should be looking at that, but I don't you didn't want to include an uncertain grant that we actually know exists and that we could be qualified for. I think we need to explore those questions. And, but I would be very uncomfortable budgeting for advertising revenue when we didn't have any data upon which to place that value.
I'm not suggesting that.
So if I could go back just a minute, the rest of us all said what our goals were for the budget, and
So
I'm sorry.
don't
I
let's
had-
finish.
Mr. Scott, let her finish, all right? You don't like to be interrupted. Let her finish.
I hadn't heard your goals.
Yeah, my goal is, as I take a look at our financial situation, we have depleted all of our investments. We have depleted our cash reserves. The financial situation that Island Transit finds itself in is in dire straits. We as board members need to be held accountable. We are responsible for the situation that Island Transit is in right now. My goal is to think outside the box and think of other revenue sources besides just grants. That if we are going to continue to rely just on sales tax revenue and grant money, that is uncertain, especially if we end up having a negative audit here shortly. I think our future grant situations are in question. And so my goal is to continue to think outside the box. There should be programs in place to not only take great input from the public, but great input from our employees so that we could see cost-cutting measures. And a 25% cash balance is appropriate. The General Accounting Standard Board, GASB, recommends at least a 2 months as far as a cash balance. What you're currently dealing with and what it, we're not done yet as we continue to look at the financials. It is not good. We owe taxpayers an apology, and we need to right the ship. And right now, there doesn't seem to be much urgency. This board knew about this problem going back to April.
So, I appreciate your perspective. I think that we universally agree that we're on a tight budget, and we've had a number of discussions about thinking outside of the box and trying to look at other revenue sources. In fact, this board talked about looking at fares. I think this community has voted 3 times to support fare-free system, and that the study that was done in the past showed that it would generate about 6% of our revenues, and that it would need 15% revenues to break even. I don't know that that's still the case. I think we should examine it. I think our community deserves a fresh look at that. But I think the community outreach and the conversations that you're having are really going to be dependent upon us getting an interim director in place who can help us with that. We each have other responsibilities. I'm grateful that Bob Clay has been able to make himself available here on a daily basis, but we have other responsibilities that we need to take care of, and we need to provide the support for the staff that are here to do exactly what you're talking about, is to take a sharp pencil to all of the expenses. I don't know if our medical plans have been closely together. Maybe there's some savings that could happen there. I think those are ongoing conversations for us to have, and I don't think there's anyone sitting on this board that disagrees with that, Scott. So I don't quite accept your thought that we're not trying to think outside of the box, because I think we are all willing to do that and look for solutions.
I'd say, where's the action? You've known about this since April. Where is the action? If you're going to do a study, why haven't we done that? Where is the urgency? Yes, we all have obligations, but obviously this is a priority. This is a situation that hasn't come to us overnight. This was a long process that this board allowed to happen. Where is the urgency
No,
in
Scott,
creating
I'm gonna-
a strategic recovery plan?
Okay, I'm gonna cut you off just a little bit because your premise, you've got a couple of premises here that, as a board member, bother me. The board is supposed to be a supportive body to the organization that it governs. It's supposed to provide leadership, and certainly in a situation we find ourselves in, we need the leadership. And I really don't appreciate your doom and gloom statements, your continual stating the fact that this board has done nothing, that it is responsible for all of the things that have happened. This board has done a great deal. We have lost 2 key employees. We have spent an innumerable amount of time, our own personal time, here because we care about the transit system. We're trying to work ahead, to go ahead. And quite frankly, sometimes I wonder where you appear in that area of trying to move the transit system ahead. I think that the budget process we're working on right now is a good budget process. We've spent a lot of time on it, and we have another week to go through it individually, and we can sit down and talk next Friday about it. But accusing people all the time, it's getting a little old, personally. My 2 cents.
Well, if you're taking it personal, the fact is, you've been on the board for many, many years. You know, you should be held accountable. You're responsible for the situation that we're in. My recommendation to you would be do the honorable thing and step down so that we have a board that takes action. I'm the only one that brought up advertising today.
Well,
I'll tell you what, I don't even know if that, I owe you a comment on what you just said.
I'm not asking for comment. I'm asking for action.
No, we should talk. Here's the action we're going to take. We're going to move on to business item number 2. Everyone agree
Please
with that?
repeat what you just said, Your Honor.
so, I think it's very appropriate for board members to bring forward ideas on how they might integrate new revenues into next year. What I don't think makes sense is to talk about adding a line item for advertising when we have nothing, and we need to get some more information about that before we build it into the budget.
I didn't suggest
So
that.
I don't know what action you think that you're, I'm really confused by your comments. I think this board was aware that we were spending down revenues to build this facility. We knew that it was going to take a substantial part of it was going to take most of our resources. We knew that. The cash flow information that we received showed that even with that reduction, that we would be on this tight timeline earlier. What we found out is that those cash flow projections were inaccurate. This board took action to address that in a timely manner, and that took a great deal of time and effort. We then have moved forward with trying to get a new finance director hired. We needed to put in place a finance committee that would start looking at the cash flow and the bank statements on a regular basis. So we're not done, but those are some very significant steps. And I think we need to continue to be working collaboratively to move the organization forward so that we can restore services to the best of our ability. If advertising is a part of that, so be it. I'm not opposed to talking about those items. But Oak Harbor has had a seat at this table. Kelly Emerson was at this table, and other members of this community have been at this table over time. This isn't some unusual circumstance. What we've done is move forward. We've got an organization. There were human errors that were made. We're going to address those in a proactive way to serve our community. I think that's why we're all here, is to serve our community and to provide transit service. That's why I'm here. And I hope that we can have that spirit moving forward. If it means putting advertising into the budget, let's look and see what our constraints are around that. But I'm hoping that we can move on this item number 2, because I think getting an interim director hired as quickly as possible is gonna help us to fulfill the other goal. So I would like to get just an update. We did appoint a committee to move forward, and I know there were some constraints around that. I have a proposal once you've given your a brief report, perhaps, how you thought about moving forward.
5-minute break, and then we'll go into
Okay.
number 2.
Yeah, I can.
5-minute recess. Board.